Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to join this panel today. Let's start with the European party politics in this fight between sovereignists and the globalists. Early July, it will be 1 year that the Patriots for Europe has been founded, and today it's one of the biggest EP groups in the European Parliament. And how do you see the last year? How do you see the activity of the Patriots in the European Parliament, in and outside of the European Parliament, in the European political scene?
So first of all, thank you for the question, and thank you for all to you that you are here with us today, and especially the organizers of CPACHungary. We need these gatherings, conservatives need these gatherings, so thank you so much again. For a patriot, let's say honestly, party politics and political decision making is in the nation state, without any questions. But at the same time, we have a European Parliament. And in the European Parliament, what we see for the last year, since the Patriots were founded by Prime Minister Orban and his fellows in Vienna, we see that the political landscape in Europe changed. We have now 85 MEPs sitting in the Patriots group, and the sheer number means that we are the third biggest and third largest group in the European Parliament. And they fear us because they see after the win of Donald Trump in the United States of America for the last year, that the Patriots' voices are stronger on each side of the pond. So we are working together with our Danish friends, of course, and our voice is louder than before in Brussels.
Anders, let me turn to you now, and let's go to national level. How do you see, from a Danish perspective, what are the key topics of this fight between globalists and sovereignists? Is it migration, or is it changing today? How is the political agenda changing in the European Union?
I think that's a very simple answer. Migration is the core issue that ties our patriotic movement together. I think it's said many times, but migration is destiny. If you just open your borders like most of Western Europe have done, then you gradually change pieces of your society that you can never have back. In Denmark, we are talking about black spaces on the map. That's not meaning things eroding into the North Sea or the Baltic Sea. That is meaning areas of our cities, our major cities, that are becoming no-go zones. No-go zones for the Jewish population, for females, for people of Christian origin, simply because we have allowed too many Islamists to set foot in our country. And the worst thing about that from a Danish perspective is that we are not the country that is worst off. It's much worse in Sweden, it's much worse in Germany, in France, in Great Britain, in Belgium, in the Netherlands. So we are sort of a gateway between the sensible Eastern countries who have not allowed this irresponsible migration to happen, and the Western countries who are in a very, very peculiar situation where the migration have almost become irreversible. And that is why it's so important that we're working together, prompting up these socialist and liberal narratives that all migration is good, and we just need more and more uncontrolled Middle East, North African migration in Europe.
Thank you. Roger, you are the only one here in the panel outside of the European Union. From a Swiss perspective, and being a former politician who dealt with European issues, how do you see the current political situation and the last decades that finally ended up in today's political situation?
Yes, Attila. Well, first of all, it's always great to be in Hungary, the epicenter of resistance and common sense in this strange institutional construction of the European Union. I mean, it's really interesting when I follow this conference now for the second time. In Switzerland, we started to discuss these issues here, migration and the European Union as an intellectual misconception, as something that doesn't work. We started to discuss this in the 90s already, because it's always the same question, which is also here: who makes the laws in our own countries? Who is the chief in our own countries? Who defines the national interests? Is that a group of non-elected bureaucrats and functionaries who decide things that are diametrically against the interest of the people as far as migration is concerned, as far as prosperity is concerned, as far as security is concerned. We have now a war in Europe. I mean, you have to imagine that. I mean, the EU was built to prevent wars, and so they didn't fulfill on their promise. And in Switzerland, we are sovereignists from 1291. I mean, we are natural-born sovereignists. We defend our democratic order, but we are also open towards the world. We are not against anybody. We are for Switzerland, and therefore we see that this patriotic movement, it seems to resonate our Swiss debates we had in our direct democracy since 30 years. So we are the secret vanguard of reason and common sense, and we're looking with great pleasure that other countries follow up in the meantime.
In this regard, what would you say like best practice for a nation to resist European institutions, for example? Are there best practices, are there recipes in this fight?
It's very simple. Just say no. Just say no. And then you will notice that this whole avalanche of anger that comes then, there is not so much behind it. So first of all, you have to say no. That's the most important thing. I think the word no is the most important word in democracy. Democracy is the form of government to say no. No to the politicians, no to the governments, no to some international institutions, and yes to your own country. Just say no.
And let's get back to European politics. Patriots hasn't been awarded the positions in the European Parliament it deserved when the European Parliament was founded, like in a committee, presidency, etc., etc. How do you see the potential allies of Patriots? What is the relationship now with the ECR, with the EPP? How do you see the potential or real cooperation with the Europe of Sovereign Nations, EP group? How do you see this constellation?
First of all, let me be very clear. It's not important for the electorate of the European Union and the European continent if Anders Vistisen or Anu Shalabaros is, I don't know, vice chairman of a committee. Honestly, nobody cares. It's a simple question, of course, of democracy, what the socialists, communists, the liberals and the Greens always doing in such questions. They regard themselves as Democrats, and of course they are not respecting the democratic will of the people. Sorry, but the same happened in the Bundestag in Germany for 2 legislative periods now. What they are doing with the AfD is a joke and a fraud against democracy. What Europe needs is a very patient but loud voice that the European Commission is not a government. The European Parliament is not a sole law-giving body. Basically, decisions should be made by the nation states in Council. That is what we are advocating for. And secondly, what we say is, at the same time, we have enough. The European electorate had enough, because you always see the backroom deals in the European Parliament between socialists, the EPP pressed to the center, always going to the center and to the left, and the Greens. And it's bad. We saw that in Germany, we saw that in Austria, we saw that in every country where the Greens got the power, that basically it was harmful for the European economy, it was harmful for the European families, it was harmful for the European people. And the people had enough from the woke nonsense that came through Brussels, that comes through the soft power of Soros and all his organizations. So what we have to do now is find deals to work together on the conservative side. And yes, we have to work together with the ECN. We have to work together, of course, with the ECR. We had very good friends with the Italians, with the Polish in ECR as well. We have to work together. And yes, we have to talk also common sense into the EPP. It has no future to make your deals always with the left. No future at all.
Anders, Prime Minister Orban said today in the morning that the election of Donald Trump in the United States brought a new era, or has brought a new era for patriots. And a new chapter began in this fight between globalists and patriots. From a Danish perspective, how do you see it? And I take the opportunity here now that in recent months, when I heard about Denmark, it was more about Greenland. This very particular topic, how do you see the situation broadly with the advent of Trump, and particularly the situation in Denmark?
I think, generally speaking, we are on the stepping stone of a seismic shift in policies. Like we saw the liberals coming forward in the middle of the 1800s, we saw the social democratic forces taking over in the beginning of the last century. I think one of the slogans here is that we are now in an age of patriotism, where the conservative right will rise as a common sense project that will unite between countries of the West. And that is also why I think the important thing is that we work together towards our common goals instead of bickering internally. And I think that goes across the Atlantic, and it goes internally in Europe. When I began out in European politics 11 years ago, we were told that there were certain fractions, parties we could not work with, but my mantra has always been that when Viktor Orban came and was attacked by the European Union, regardless that I was not in the same group as the Fidesz at that point in time, I would defend the Hungarian government to rule in Hungary as they choose to do, with support from their people, the Hungarian people. Because I knew if I didn't defend Mr. Orban in Europe 11 years ago, they would attack Denmark when we tried to limit migration. And I think it's awful that we have a regime in Brussels who talks about rule of law, who talks about democracy, but fines Hungary to protect our borders. Every day Hungary is still fined for the fact that you are keeping out illegal migrants. That is insane. And just to add on to that, when the European Union do their own rigged opinion polls and ask who in Europe is most fond of the European project, the countries with most opt-outs, with most restrictions on the European Union membership are the happiest. Maybe in Brussels they should reflect a little bit about the fact that Denmark, Ireland, other countries who are not in the migration scheme, who are not having the common currency of the euro, who doesn't believe in a federal European army, are the countries that are more happy than most federalist ones. And just from a purely Danish perspective, and I will end up with that, is we have been told by the Europeans that we are the most reluctant partner. The Danish people have voted no for more European integration on 4 separate occasions. And I say, no, Danes don't hate the European Union more than anyone else. We just have a constitution that obliges the politicians to ask the people. Because every time the people is asked, in France, in Ireland, in Holland, Netherlands, and so on, whether they want more Brussels or less Brussels, the answer is unified. They want less Brussels and more national state.
So practically Danes has already applied the recipe from Switzerland. Roger, let me continue with you in a little bit broader perspective. In the last year, we have seen elections in the United States, Germany, Austria, Romania, Poland, Portugal, etc., etc. How do you see the changing political landscape in the European Union? We see in many member states that the Brussels-backed liberal mainstream parties are fighting with the patriots. How do you see the current stance of this
I
fight?
think what we see now is some kind of conservative revolution. And the vehemence and the impact of this revolution shows you that our countries have marched in the wrong direction. And it's more and more people start to realize that they have been betrayed by their politicians, that these politicians that didn't fulfill the interest of the people, but they were just, helping their own interests. And we see a huge backlash against this. Now, Switzerland has a completely different system, and I would say we have more incremental change. We are, due to our direct democracy, to our neutrality, to our federalism, which means that the cantons have a great power, not the centralized government. This means that these kind of very strong man politicians are fortunately not needed in Switzerland. But still we have the same problems. We have also, like all the countries, especially Germany, Switzerland, the United States, they just were too successful, they had too much money, and they became decadent. They thought they could solve all the problems with money. They thought they could bring in the whole world of migrants that they couldn't cope with. And now, yeah, it's the great backlash of reason, the backlash of common sense, and it's the counter-revolution of conservatism. And and the age of common sense starts again. Until people get crazy again, the leftists will prevail, but now it's the time for the conservatives to clean up the mess that the left and the green have left us to clean up.
Let's talk, Ernő, Roger, a little bit about the politics of the German-speaking countries in Europe, because you mentioned already Germany, the example of Germany, and also the Austria, that the will of people seems to be neglected, has been neglected. How can patriots fight against this phenomena? What do you think? What can be the way out?
Look, we see what happens here in my country, in Hungary. There is an opposition party supported by Manfred Weber, by the EPP, and pushed towards a success that is never coming. But what we see in the German-speaking world, the same happens. Normal people, normal everyday people, since the Second World War, voted for the EPP parties in Germany, for CDU in Austria, for the ÖVP, or social democratic parties and movements. See what happened to their countries. They see what it was promised. Migration year by year, month by month, week by week, people coming from all around the world. That will make your life better. You will live better. Your GDP will be higher. Your kids go to better schools. The next generation in your family will live better than your ancestors. And it's not happening. It's a lie. And what you see now, that in my opinion, but of course, I'm not living in Germany, I'm not living in Switzerland, I'm not living in Austria, but at the same time I realize, as I travel this country since my childhood, is that you can see that these countries changed. And I'm utterly afraid that these countries change for good. And the problem is that the people realize that. And when I see the Freedom Party of Austria, for the first time in history, a patriot party, winning an election, it's the outright against every push of the mainstream media, every push from the EPP, every push from European organizations and institutions. That is a sign. And you see that in Germany as well. Times are changing, times are shifting, people are shifting in mind, and they realize and see that change has to come now, because if it's not happening, then it's over. This game is over. Their countries, their society changes for good. And it's the last gaps, it's the last hour. We have to work together and stop this nonsense, stop illegal, and honestly I have to say, stop uncontrolled migration to this continent.
And
Roger.
I think I would like to add one aspect in a non-Swiss, undiplomatic way. I think we have to realize that the European Union is the opposite of democracy. It's basically undemocratic, and you see these tendencies now, how they treat the opposition, how they treat politicians who are not part of the mainstream. And this is essentially much harder than I thought it would ever be possible. And Germany somehow, it seems to me, I spent quite a lot of time in Germany. Germany is now some kind of battleground for the soul of Europe, you could say, where you have very, very strong attempts to silence the opposition. And I have a great admiration for politicians who are ready to go against this very fierce attacks that they have to endure. And this, I really have to say that Viktor Orban, I know him now for 12 years or something. That's the first time I interviewed him 13 years ago, I think. And he has been an extremely important inspiration. And I see how the Germans, the conservatives in other countries look up to Hungary. Switzerland is too small, you know, we are a bit sidelined, but it's very important. And we just have to see that the European Union in its current form it cannot survive. It is the opposite of our democracy. It's the opposite of our values. It just, you know, they push aside everything that is precious to us, and this needs a very strong fight and thick skin and a lot of positive energy to go on. But these forces, they cannot win. I mean, the patriots, whatever you call them, the Democrats, the sovereignists, they will win this battle because the other side is too weak at the end of the day.
Anders, CPAC is the global meeting of patriotic political forces. From your experiences, what recipe, what best practice, what advice would you give to those political forces who fight globalists around the world?
I think what CPACHungary has succeeded in doing, I think actually it's instrumental in gathering the Patriot fraction, who is now the third largest force in the European Parliament, is to bring together people with national conservative patriotic backgrounds. And we get to know each other, we have a cup of coffee in the back room, we meet with all your great patriots who have shown up here to show you support, and that have created a lot more dialogue that today is used for our shared fight against undemocratic measures. And I think the greatest atrocity here is that this revolution in Europe comes from the fringes, not from the heartlands of Germany, France, and these German-speaking countries. And I see wokeism as the biggest threat here to the European mentality. But the German wokeism has a particularly evil component, and that is the weaponization of the past. So every time there's a common sense party rising in Germany, partially also in Austria, the fascist, communist background of these countries are used as an attack mechanism. But who is acting as the fascist in this world? Who is the one threatening to fire people who have voted for a democratically elected party in Germany? Is it the AfD who wants to fire policewomen or men who have worked, who are voted for the CDU or for the SPD? No, it's the other way around. And therefore, I think to save Europe, we need to save Germany, and it has to be the countries around Germany, like the example of Hungary, the example of Denmark, the example of other countries, Switzerland also, that can show the way for Germany to come back to common sense. And we need the largest country in the European Union, in continental Europe, and the strongest economy to come back, because otherwise this recession in economy, in migration, in cultural decline will just continue. We need actually a strong Germany to prevail as Europeans.
Let it be the last word. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. And the discussion of CPAC continues. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.